this video, I'm going to show you 5 different joins that you can use when you need to join a new ball of your linen or cotton yarn to your project. The first join I'm going to show you is the magic knot. The magic knot join is, as the name suggests, an actual knot. I know a lot of us don't love knots in our knitting and will do anything to avoid them, but this is actually a great join for tape yarns or times when weaving in ends would be super apparent. I'm using 2 colors of Dando Cotton Fine for this example so you can see what I'm doing more easily. Arrange your first yarn in this right angle, and then take your second yarn and mirror that by laying the second yarn on top of the first. With my darker yarn, I'm going to tie a knot around the lighter yarn. Pull this knot as tightly as you can. Now do the same thing with your lighter yarn, tying it around the darker yarn and pulling the knot tightly. Holding each yarn to the outside of the knots, pull on each end until the knots touch. Again, you can pull really tightly here to make sure that knot isn't going anywhere. Now snip off the yarn ends as close as possible to the knot. You should be able to pull again here, just to test the strength of it. Here's an example of what this join looks like in a finished garment, where I ended up having to use a magic knot right on the front of the garment. It's actually not very noticeable at all. The second join I'm going to show you is the tube join. The tube join is one of my favorites for yarns that are constructed like a hollow tube. I'm using 2 colors of Quince & Co. Kestrel for this example. I'm first going to thread the red end onto a darning needle. Then I'm going to pick a point on my blue yarn about 4 to 6 inches from the end. This takes a little finagling sometimes, but you want to get the tip of your darning needle inside the tube of the blue yarn. Keep feeding the needle through the tube for a few inches. Then poke the needle through the wall of the tube and pull the red yarn through. Now gently pull on the red yarn just until the end disappears inside the blue tube. Now thread the blue end onto your needle. You're going to want to try to do the same thing and enter the red yarn as close as possible to where the red and the blue are now joined. Again, feed the needle through the tube. Before you pull this tail through, take a good hold of the yarn at the join, just so that it doesn't go anywhere. After you've pulled this tail through, pull on the red yarn to even everything out. At this point, pull this little blue tail through just a tiny bit so you can snip the end off, and then pull on the red yarn so that the end of the blue yarn disappears inside the red tube. You can pull as hard as you want on this join, it is not going anywhere. I used the tube join throughout my Ellery top by Elizabeth Doherty. This join is so invisible that it took me a while to find it, and in fact I can only really find it by feeling with my fingers. The third join I'm going to show you is the Sewn Join. This one is probably going to give the perfectionists out there the heebie-jeebies. For this example, I'm using shibui linen, which is a chain construction. You'll need a regular hand sewing needle and matching thread. Thread straight off the bobbin has a lot of tension in it, so run your fingers along the thread a few times before you make your knot. For this join, you simply overlap the end of the old ball with the end of the new, and you use the needle and thread to sew them together by hand. Now this is going to look pretty ugly at first, but for your first few stitches, you basically just want to make sure that you're going through both yarns. I like to pass my needle through the loop of thread created by the knot. Repeat this a few times to secure. Again, don't worry about it if it looks messy at this stage. You can see that I'm almost using a blanket stitch technique here, but you can really do whatever you want as long as both ends are secured to each other. Once both ends are secured, we can start working on making this look a bit nicer. If anyone remembers making those spiral friendship bracelets where you basically just tie knots around a piece of string, that's what we're doing here. You just want to keep creating these knots with the sewing thread and then nudging them into place so that they are over that sewn join. Now that's starting to look better. Roll the join between your fingers to make it just a bit more malleable. Then you can snip off any stray ends of thread or yarn. Here is what that looks like on my in-progress swatch. Now obviously it's not ideal to have this join happen right in the middle of your work, so in order to move it closer to a side seam or to the edge of your work, here is what you can do. Knit to your side seam, the edge of your garment, wherever you would like the join to eventually end up, and cut the yarn off there. Then you're going to unknit just so that you have a little bit of a tail to work with. Once you have your tail, then you can do your join. Here is what these joins look like on the unblocked swatch, both in the middle of the swatch and at the side. And here is what they look like in the blocked swatch. The fourth join I'm going to show you is the braided join. The braided join is super cool. You can use this if you have a yarn with multiple plies. For this example, I'm using Fibra Natura Flax, which has 4 plies, but this would also be a good option for something like a Quince & Co. Sparrow. To get started, untwist the yarn coming off of your project so that you can see the plies and separate them in half. You'll need about 3 to 4 inches. Take the end of your new ball and lay it between the split plies. You can secure these with whatever you have laying around. I'm using a hair clip for this, but you can have a friend hold it, or however else you want to keep these 3 strands organized. Since I'm home alone today, I'm going to secure this to my tailor's ham to hold it steady. Always bringing the outside strand over the one in the middle. Now you just do a simple braid with the 3 strands. Getting started can be a little bit fiddly, but you want to try to make this braid as tight as possible. Keep braiding all the way till the very end. I would not clip these ends just yet. This is another join that is for sure not going to go anywhere. Here is what the join looks like knitted into an unblocked swatch. After you block your project, you can clip these tails off if you want, but honestly I would just leave them. That way you know they're not going to poke through to the right side. Here's the blocked swatch. The 5th and last join I'm going to show you today is knitting with the yarns held double. For this example, we're using Quins & Co. Sparrow. Knit with your working yarn until you have between 8 and 12 inches left. Take your new yarn and hold it behind your work. I like to use my non-working hand to just secure it temporarily until I get started. Holding both yarns together, knit just a few stitches. You really don't need to do very many in order for this to be secure. Then you simply drop the tail of your old yarn, pick up your new yarn by itself, and continue on. This method does create what look like doubled stitches, but next time you come to them, just work each of them as if they were a single stitch. I like to leave these tails hanging until after I've blocked my project. Here is what the join looks like in the unblocked swatch. You can weave these ends in if you would like using duplicate stitch, but it's honestly not really necessary. Here is the blocked swatch. At this point you can cut your tails off. I would still leave about 1 inch to just hang to the inside, that way you know that these tails are not going to poke through to the right side of your work. So that's it, 5 joins for when you're working with linen or cotton yarns. Let me know in the comments if you try any of these, or if you have a different join that I didn't mention here. See you next time!